Okay, so are you interested in getting better at understanding the people around you? Well, get ready, because we're going to dive into some fascinating ideas about how to truly see people.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to be exploring the work of David Brooks.
Okay.
He's a journalist who has spent his career observing and interviewing people from all walks of life.
Sounds interesting.
It is, and we've got excerpts from his book, How to Know a Person. I'm really excited to unpack some of his insightful observations with you today.
Me too.
Think of it as like a crash course in becoming more perceptive, more empathetic, and just honestly just plain better at connecting with others.
I like it.
Yeah. So what really stood out to you from his work?
What I thought was really fascinating is how Brooks kind of frames this whole idea of seeing people.
Okay.
He starts by talking about his own journey as an observer, which began way back in childhood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he actually shares this anecdote about his nursery school teacher who noticed that young David was always watching other children instead of joining in.
Almost like he was a little anthropologist in the making.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
But he also talks about how this tendency towards observation might have made it harder for him to connect with people on a personal level.
That's interesting.
Like he tells this story about his high school crush.
Oh, yeah. What happened there?
He was totally surprised when the girl he liked wanted to date someone else.
Oh, no.
And he couldn't understand why.
Interesting.
He thought like his writing skills should have been enough, to win her over.
Like, I'm a good writer, come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really highlights how our own internal models, our own assumptions, can sometimes just totally blind us to what others are truly thinking and feeling.
It makes you wonder, like, if someone who spends their life interviewing and writing about people can struggle with social connection.
Right.
What does that mean for the rest of us?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And Brooks actually argues that we as a society just don't place enough emphasis on teaching these vital social skills, which contributes to the increasing loneliness and disconnection we see today.
It's something I think about a lot.
Yeah.
You know, we spend years learning math and science and history.
Right.
But how often do we formally learn about empathy, active listening, or how to navigate difficult conversations?
Yeah. I mean, Brooks argues that our current education system often prioritizes career preparation over the development of social and emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Which can have just a huge impact on our ability to build meaningful relationships.
Yeah, he even talks about how our constant focus on social media can actually hinder the development of genuine connection. It's like we're becoming increasingly adept at performing connection rather than actually experiencing it.
That's such a good point, and he takes it even a step further, arguing that this lack of social skills makes it even harder to address some of the biggest challenges we face as a society. Well, think about the growing divides between different groups, racial, political, socioeconomic. Brooks argues that our inability to truly see and understand each other just makes those divisions worse.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
So what does Brooks suggest we do about it?
Well, he introduces this idea of the illuminator.
The illuminator.
Yeah. So an illuminator is someone who approaches others with a certain kind of gaze.
Okay.
One that is tender and receptive and full of genuine curiosity.
I love that imagery.
Yeah.
So can you give us an example of what this illuminator's gaze actually looks like in action?
Yeah. So Brooks shares this story about meeting a woman named Mrs. Dorsey while he was in Waco, Texas, interviewing people. And as they're talking, a young man named Jimmy walks in. And he greets Mrs. Dorsey with just this incredible warmth and familiarity.
You could tell they knew each other well.
Oh, yeah. You could totally tell that Jimmy knew Mrs. Dorsey well, and it really showed in the way he interacted with her. And Brooks realized that his own approach to the interview, while respectful, lacked that same depth of connection.
Interesting.
And it was like a turning point for him, realizing that there's a difference between simply observing someone and truly seeing them.
So it's about more than just gathering information.
Right.
It's about recognizing the humanity of the person in front of you.
Exactly. And this leads to another important concept that Brooks introduces. Beholding.
Beholding.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
So beholding, it goes beyond simply seeing the external. It's about perceiving the wholeness of a person. Their joys, their sorrows, their complexities. It's about understanding the world from their perspective.
This reminds me of the story Brooks shares about beholding his wife.
Yes.
He wasn't just seeing her, he was perceiving her inner world.
Yes.
Her vulnerabilities, her spirit.
Exactly. And to truly behold someone,
Okay.
Brooks argues that we need to ask the right questions.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What kind of questions is he recommending?
So Brooks highlights the work of his friend David Bradley,
Okay.
who uses this unique method to help people gain clarity about their lives.
Interesting.
So Bradley starts by asking specific questions about a person's goals, their skills, and how they spend their time.
It's like he's helping them to step back and see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Connect the dots of their own lives.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Brooks believes that the power of this approach lies in helping people to tell their stories.
Oh, interesting.
Because people reveal themselves most authentically when they share their experiences in a narrative framework.
Okay.
It's not just about the facts.
Yeah.
It's about the meaning those facts hold for the person telling the story.
So by listening to someone's story, we can start to see the world through their eyes, understand their motivations, and connect with them on a deeper level.
Yes, and Brooks emphasizes that this type of deep listening is crucial for truly seeing people.
Okay.
He says that fundamentally, a person is a point of view. Each of us constructs our own reality based on our unique experiences and interpretations.
So you're saying it's not just that we have different opinions, it's that we're literally seeing different worlds.
In a way, yes. And to explain this, Brooks actually delves into brain science a little bit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To show how our minds actively construct reality rather than passively recording it.
He even brings up that fascinating experiment with the invisible gorilla.
Yes.
Where people focused on counting basketball passes.
Right.
Completely miss a gorilla walking through the scene.
I know, it's crazy.
That's wild.
And he mentions another experiment
Okay.
where someone asking for directions doesn't even notice when the person they're talking to is switched out mid-conversation.
What?
Yeah.
That's so strange.
I know, it's wild. And these experiments demonstrate how much our perception is shaped by what we expect to see, by our preconceived notions and biases.
It's mind-boggling to think about how much we might be missing.
Right.
Simply because we're not paying attention, or because our expectations are coloring our perceptions.
Yeah, and Brooks uses this term affordances to describe this phenomenon.
Affordances?
Yeah, can I explain that a little bit?
Yeah, please explain what affordances are.
Okay, so affordances basically refer to how our capabilities and experiences influence how we perceive the world.
So, for example, a professional athlete might see a basketball court differently than someone who's never played the sport.
Exactly.
Because they have a different understanding of the game and the skills required to play it.
Yes. Their past experiences and abilities shape their perception of the situation.
Okay.
And this applies to social interactions as well.
How so?
Well, for example, someone who has experienced a lot of hardship in their life might approach new situations with more caution than someone who has had a more privileged upbringing.
It's like we're all walking around with these invisible lenses
Right.
that shape how we see the world and each other.
Yeah, and that can make having difficult conversations incredibly challenging.
Absolutely. I mean, Brooks acknowledges that these conversations are hard precisely because we're often operating from such different realities. He even uses this analogy with how people perceive hills differently.
Oh, yeah.
Based on their physical fitness.
I love that analogy.
It's interesting. How does that relate to difficult conversations?
Well, Brooks points out that people who are less fit tend to overestimate a hill's steepness compared to those who are more fit.
Right.
It's a great metaphor for how our individual experiences can create such vastly different perceptions of the same situation.
Yeah.
What feels like an insurmountable obstacle to one person might seem like a minor inconvenience to another.
Right.
And when we try to have a conversation about that hill without acknowledging these differing perceptions, it's no wonder we often end up frustrated or talking past each other.
So how does Brooks suggest we approach these difficult conversations?
Okay.
Especially when we know we might be seeing the world very differently.
Well, he emphasizes the importance of recognizing that every conversation takes place on two levels.
Okay.
So there's the official conversation, which is what we're explicitly talking about.
Yeah.
And then there's the actual conversation.
The actual conversation, what's that?
So this actual conversation is made up of the underlying emotions, the intentions, and the nonverbal cues that shape the interaction, even if we're not consciously aware of them.
It's like there's this whole hidden language we're speaking even when we're not saying a word.
Exactly. And Brooks argues that paying attention to this actual conversation is key to building trust and understanding, especially when we're trying to navigate difficult topics.
I see.
He also stresses the importance of recognizing the frame of the conversation.
What do you mean by frame?
So the frame is basically the shared understanding of its purpose and goals.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so Brooks talks about this panel discussion where he and another panelist had very different interpretations of what the culture war meant.
Okay.
And he realized that their clashing viewpoints stemmed from a fundamental disagreement about the frame of the conversation.
So they were coming at the topic from completely different angles.
Yes, he was approaching it from a journalist's perspective.
Right. Okay.
Seeking to analyze the broader context, while she saw it as a direct assault on social justice.
Okay.
Requiring a more activist stance.
I see.
And because they weren't aligned on the frame, they just kept talking past each other.
That makes sense. So how do we avoid these kinds of communication breakdowns?
So Brooks suggests a skill he calls staying within the other person's standpoint.
Oh, okay.
So instead of trying to force the conversation back to our own frame, he encourages us to first try to understand how the world looks to the other person.
That sounds like a real shift in mindset.
It is.
From trying to be right to trying to understand.
Exactly, and it's not always easy, especially when we feel strongly about the issue at hand.
Of course.
But Brooks argues that this willingness to listen and be curious is essential for bridging divides and building genuine connection, even across differences.
It's about recognizing that our way of seeing the world isn't the only way.
Right.
And being open to learning from other perspectives.
Exactly.
This is all incredibly insightful, but let's get practical for a moment.
Okay.
What are some concrete things we can do to develop this illuminator's gaze and become better at truly seeing people?
Well, Brooks dives into this idea that understanding personality can be incredibly helpful in navigating social interactions. And he talks about the big 5 personality traits.
Okay.
Those are
extroversion, conscientiousness, neuroticism, agreeableness, and openness.
Okay.
And he explains how each of these traits shows up in different ways.
Okay.
Using examples from his own life and the lives of others.
Like how he describes Erica.
Yes.
A highly extroverted woman who thrives on pursuing pleasure and excitement. Yeah, she's always seeking out new experiences and social connections.
Exactly. And he uses the example of Lyndon B. Johnson, a politician known for his ambition and drive to illustrate conscientiousness.
Yes.
A trait associated with being organized, disciplined, and goal-oriented.
Precisely.
So understanding these traits can help us anticipate how someone might react in different situations, or even understand why they behave in certain ways.
Exactly. It's like having a framework for understanding human behavior. But it's important to remember that we're all complex individuals.
Of course.
And we shouldn't box people into rigid categories.
Right. It's about appreciating the nuance and individuality of each person,
Nice.
while also recognizing the common threads that connect us as humans.
Beautifully said. And this leads us to Brooks's exploration of life tasks.
Okay.
And the different stages of consciousness we develop as we navigate them.
Okay, wait just a minute. Before we move on to life tasks, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. You shared some really powerful ideas from David Brooks's work about the importance of seeing people, not just observing them. You've introduced us to the concept of the illuminator's gaze.
Yeah.
The power of beholding the importance of asking the right questions.
Right.
And how our individual perceptions shape our understanding of the world. These are all valuable tools for building stronger, more meaningful connections with the people around us.
They are.
So as we move into the next part of our conversation, I'm curious to hear more about these life tasks.
Okay.
And how they relate to our ability to truly see each other.
Happy to dive into that with you.
Yeah.
So Brooks's idea of life tasks really resonated with me. It's not just about checking off boxes on some predetermined list, but about the internal shifts we experience as we move through life.
That's such an important distinction.
It is.
It's not about the achievement itself, but about how those experiences shape our perspectives and our understanding of the world.
Exactly.
So what are some of these life tasks that Brooks identifies?
He outlines several key ones, like establishing a sense of agency, developing social skills, finding meaningful work, and ultimately cultivating a sense of purpose that extends beyond our individual needs.
Wow.
Each task involves a shift in consciousness, a new way of seeing ourselves and the world around us.
So it's about personal growth and evolution, not just checking things off a to-do list.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you give us an example of what one of these life task transitions might look like?
Sure. Think about the task of establishing a sense of agency.
Okay.
Something that often happens in early childhood. During that phase, we're figuring out that we're separate individuals with our own thoughts, feelings, and desires.
Brooks describes this stage as developing an imperial consciousness.
Yes.
Where our own needs and wants are front and center.
Right. And while this can sometimes manifest as self-centeredness, it's an essential step in developing a healthy sense of self.
It's like we're the rulers of our own little kingdoms, learning to assert our independence and make our own choices.
Right.
Then as we move into adolescence and early adulthood, we start to grapple with the task of building relationships and finding our place in the social world.
Yeah.
Brooks calls this developing an interpersonal consciousness.
Exactly. During this phase, we become much more aware of others' perspectives.
Okay.
And start to understand the complexities of social dynamics. We learn about empathy, cooperation, and the importance of belonging.
Yeah.
It's often a time of idealism as we become more attuned to social injustices and want to make the world a better place.
I remember that feeling so clearly from my own teenage years.
I do too.
It's like the world suddenly opens up and you start to see things in a whole new light.
Yeah.
But Brooks also cautions that idealism can have a shadow side.
That's true. He points out that our desire to belong can sometimes cloud our judgment and lead us to make decisions that aren't aligned with our values.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
It is.
Between fitting in and staying true to ourselves.
It really is.
And then we move into adulthood where many of us face the challenge of career consolidation.
Right.
We focus on building our skills and finding a sense of purpose in our work.
Yeah. This is where we often develop a more individualistic mindset, prioritizing achievement and mastery in our chosen field.
Like Brooks uses the example of Lyndon B. Johnson again.
Yes.
Highlighting his relentless ambition and drive to succeed in politics.
Exactly.
It's interesting that you bring up Johnson again. Earlier you mentioned him in the context of conscientiousness, one of the big 5 personality traits.
Right.
It seems like understanding those traits can be really helpful in making sense of these life tasks and how they shape us.
That's a great observation. Those personality traits are like threads that run through the tapestry of our lives, influencing how we approach these different challenges and transitions.
So it's not just about understanding the tasks themselves,
Right.
but also about recognizing how our individual personalities shape the way we experience them.
Yes. For instance, someone who is highly extroverted might approach the task of building relationships very differently than someone who is more introverted.
Exactly. And as we mature, many of us transition into a phase where our focus shifts beyond our individual achievements and desires. Brooks describes this as moving towards an inter-individual consciousness.
Yes.
What does that look like in practice?
So it's about becoming more aware of our interconnectedness with others and the larger world. We start to prioritize things like generativity.
Okay.
Leaving a positive mark on the world and contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
It's like our circle of concern expands beyond our immediate sphere of influence.
Exactly.
We start to think about the legacy we want to leave behind and the impact we want to have on the world.
Yes.
That's a really beautiful idea.
It is. And what's important to remember is that these life tasks aren't necessarily linear or sequential.
Okay.
We might revisit certain tasks multiple times throughout our lives as our circumstances change and we face new challenges.
That's a really helpful reminder. Life isn't a straight line.
No.
It's a winding path with twists and turns.
Yeah.
That can take us back to familiar territory or lead us in unexpected directions.
Exactly. And this understanding of life tasks can be so powerful when it comes to truly seeing other people.
How so?
It allows us to appreciate where someone might be in their own journey.
Okay.
What challenges they might be facing and what motivates their behavior. We see them not as a static image, but as a character in a story with a past, present, and future.
It's like we're recognizing their humanity, their complexity,
Yeah.
and the unique path they've traveled to reach this point.
Exactly. I know Brooks also emphasizes the power of narrative in shaping our identities.
He does. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, he introduces this concept of narrative identity,
Okay.
which is basically the story we tell ourselves about who we are, where we come from, and where we're going.
It's like we're constantly crafting and revising our own personal narratives. Does he suggest ways we can tap into those narratives when we're trying to get to know someone better?
He does. He suggests that we shift the types of questions we ask when we meet someone new.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on factual details like, what do you do?
Yeah.
We can ask questions that invite them to share their story. Like, what's your story? Or what are you working on these days?
Interesting.
Those kinds of questions can open up much richer and more meaningful conversations.
It's about going beyond the surface level and inviting them to share their experiences, their values, and their aspirations.
Precisely. And this brings us to another fascinating idea that Brooks explores.
Okay.
The influence of our ancestors.
Our ancestors.
Yes. He argues that to truly understand someone, we need to consider the impact of their cultural and familial heritage on their perspectives and behaviors.
So it's not just about understanding their individual story,
Right.
but also about recognizing the larger historical and cultural context that has shaped them.
Yes. He uses the example of Zora Neale Hurston, a Black writer who grew up in the early 20th century.
Okay.
Hurston's life was deeply shaped by her experiences as a Black woman in a society marked by racism and segregation.
Of course.
Brooks points out that Hurston's upbringing in an all-Black town in Florida, where she was surrounded by strong, resilient Black role models, instilled in her a sense of pride and strength that permeates her writing.
It's like her personal story is interwoven with the larger story of her community and her cultural heritage.
Exactly. And Brooks argues that this awareness is crucial for developing a deeper understanding of others.
He delves into research on cultural differences, highlighting Richard Nisbet's work.
Yes.
Which explores the contrasting worldviews of East and West.
Nisbet's research suggests that people from Western cultures often emphasize individual agency and independence.
Okay.
While people from Eastern cultures tend to prioritize social harmony and interdependence.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much of our own worldview is shaped by our cultural background, often without us even realizing it.
Exactly. Brooks also discusses the work of David Hackett Fisher, who traced the enduring influence of early settlement patterns on cultural differences within the United States.
Wow.
It's remarkable how these historical and cultural influences can continue to shape our values and behaviors even generations later.
So it's not just about acknowledging the individual.
Right.
It's about recognizing the web of cultural and historical influences that have shaped their perspectives and experiences.
Precisely. And Brooks believes that this awareness can help us approach interactions with greater empathy and understanding.
Okay.
Recognizing that our own way of seeing the world isn't the only way.
It's about being open to different perspectives and embracing the richness that diversity brings to our interactions.
Exactly.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
I feel like I'm already starting to see the people in my life with fresh eyes.
That's great.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear more about Brooks's thoughts on wisdom and how it relates to the art of truly seeing people.
I'm happy to share that with you. Brooks says that wisdom is the ability to see deeply into who people are and to kind of guide them through the complexities of life. And he actually shares stories about moments when he felt truly seen by others, moments that had a profound impact on him.
What kind of moments?
Well, he talks about a teacher who called him out on his tendency toward glibness.
Oh, wow.
Challenging him to, express himself with more sincerity and depth.
Okay.
He also mentions an anecdote about Franklin D. Roosevelt, who astutely observed Lyndon B. Johnson's ambition and predicted that he had the potential to become the first Southern president.
It sounds like these were instances where someone saw beyond the surface and recognized his potential, both his strengths and his areas for growth.
Exactly.
It must have been incredibly powerful to feel so deeply understood.
It was, and Brooks believes that these moments of wisdom reveal a profound understanding of human nature, a capacity to recognize the unique gifts and challenges that each person brings to the world.
I like that.
Yeah, he argues that wisdom comes from a combination of life experience, reflection, and deep listening.
Wow.
The very skills we've been exploring throughout our conversation today.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge.
Right.
It's about cultivating the ability to understand and apply that knowledge in a way that benefits ourselves and others.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Brooks argues that this is the ultimate goal of learning how to truly see people.
Okay.
To develop wisdom.
Right.
And to use it to build a more compassionate and connected world.
That's beautiful.
He even shares this powerful example from Catherine Schultz's book, Lost and Found.
Okay.
Schultz describes a conversation she had with her father about his experience as a Jewish refugee during World War II.
Wow, I can only imagine how moving that conversation must have been.
It was a moment of profound connection for both of them.
Yeah.
By listening deeply and without judgment, Schultz allowed her father to share his experiences in a way he hadn't been able to before.
That's amazing.
It strengthened their bond and deepened her understanding of who he was.
It's incredible how a simple act of listening can create such powerful shifts in our relationships.
I think so, too. And, Brooks reflects on his own strengths and weaknesses when it comes to seeing others. And he acknowledges that even though he knows how important deep listening is, he still sometimes falls into the trap of self-promotion. Focusing on showcasing his own knowledge and wit instead of truly focusing on the other person.
It sounds like he's still a work in progress, just like all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. But he also recognizes that he's grown over the years.
Yeah.
Becoming more vulnerable, approachable, and genuinely curious about others.
That self-awareness is so important.
It is.
Recognizing our own tendencies and biases is essential for continuing to grow and develop our capacity to see others clearly.
I agree.
It's like we're all on this journey of learning how to better connect with each other. And it's a lifelong process.
It is.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into David Brooks's work.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for approaching my interactions with others.
That's great.
One thing that really stuck with me is his idea that truly seeing someone means recognizing their inner depths, their struggles, their dreams, their unique perspective on the world.
It's so true. And what I appreciate about Brooks's work is that he gives us a roadmap for developing that kind of perceptiveness. It's not about mastering some complex psychological theory. It's about cultivating simple but powerful habits like active listening, curiosity, and empathy.
I love that. What would happen if we all approached our interactions with a little more tenderness and curiosity?
I don't know.
How might that change the way we see each other and the way we see ourselves? It's a beautiful challenge, and one that has the potential to transform not just our individual relationships, but our entire world.
It does.
There's so much more to discover in David Brooks's writing.
Yes.
We encourage you to check out his book, How to Know a Person, and continue your own deep dive into the art of truly seeing people. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep seeking those moments of genuine human connection.